Yeah, we have some questions. So if I may read it out to you, maybe one or two,
That's great.
just to start it off. So there's a question to Mr. Nalaka Gunawardana. To what extent science reveals the absolute truth of a phenomenon or problem being investigated? When and where science could result in relativism? Is science ever evolving? So then what is science in layman's terms? So Ruan Ediri Singha from the University of Colombo is raising that question.
Well, I think that's a more philosophical question that's been raised. I can't see the question in the chat. Did it come through chat?
Yes, but it came to me. Let me quickly direct it in the main.
Trying to understand the question. What is science to the layman? I mean, I think from the layman or the non-scientist perspective, and non-scientists can include people who are specialized in other fields, like lawyers, for example, trained in other disciplines, but not necessarily in natural or social sciences. So the question is, truth is something that science goes in search of, and through an iterative process, it understands more as time passes. But I think where the science society nexus is concerned, we need scientific evidence, insights, and scientific understanding to address day-to-day issues. At the beginning, I mentioned what I had told Vidusara 10 years ago, that with the advances of science and technology, society is faced with many choices to make, various alternatives that confront us, ethical dilemmas that we have to navigate through, and sometimes trade-offs between two ends. We have to trade off. All of us had to do trade-offs during COVID. We had to restrict our mobility as a trade-off for our protection from the virus until such time the vaccines became available. So all that, COVID being a very recent experience, it was necessary to explain things. Health communicators did this fairly well during the early months of the pandemic. I thought our Health Promotion Bureau and other health educators tried to explain why certain things were being restricted, why society was locked down to prevent transmission of the virus. So, without getting too philosophical, I would say we need that scientific knowledge applied to real world challenges and issues and problems, so that certain solutions can be found and certain relief can be provided to those who are in need of that. And in doing so, we don't create further downstream problems. Now, if only the scientific evidence was heeded and scientific advice was heeded 1 year ago, when the government was embarking on this rapid organic drive and banning chemical fertilizers and other agrochemicals overnight, if there was greater debate and the government was more receptive to scientific advice, the current food crisis could have been averted. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. But even in less drastic situations, I would say there is a role for clearly communicated scientific knowledge and scientific understanding to help society to navigate through these complex challenges of today.
So I think, thank you very much. I think there is another question on the chat box. If I read it out, can one follow the instructions given here on writing a lay summary to produce a lay summary or a success story of a research conducted by another researcher? That is by reading a research report or a journal article. That is the question. It's not directed at anyone in particular. I think any one of the speakers could answer that.
I think it can be done, provided the source has to be given appropriately. Where this article is taken up, and due citation should be there. The source has to be indicated, and the summary of the highlights of that research, because they are going to communicate to the public, provided if they get a permission, is well and good from the publisher or somebody else. But as we see that there is an ethical concern behind this, because we should not translate, or we should not give a different meaning on what actually exists in that said research article. So it must be carefully taken into consideration. Probably if the permission is taken from the publisher or the author, then it will not be much serious. Otherwise, if they transform into other language with a different meaning, then there will be an issue for that, what actually it comes out.
Can I just add one thing? If for an example for what the question came, from beginning of the Vidusara, we had a page, almost a full page. A page එකේ අපි තිබ්බේ පණිනි පරීක්ෂණ නිරීක්ෂණ සහ නිගමන. දිගට මේ page
We cannot hear you, Professor Manoj.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they
I think, yes, I think he got disconnected. Yeah, we'll give him a couple of minutes, but I think we have a question here. The question is for all speakers. How do scientists make the policymakers understand science and move them to an evidence-based decision-making system? So,
it's a difficult task. Anyway, that by that educating, I mean, in that one way we can directly contact them. That even the SLAAS has a separate committee for that, the Science Stack Committee, Science Advisory Committee to the government and policymakers. I don't know whether they listen to SLAAS or not. It's a different I mean, another question. But anyway, that one way is that communicating science with the general public always increase the scientific literacy of the society. Then the scientific literate society can have impact on the government and the policymakers and also the politicians in various situations. So it's a long way, but that is also one way to communicate. I mean, one way to have an impact on politicians. Here's Nalaka, that. What do you think?
Yeah, fully agree. The other thing is, policy maker in our context can be at different levels. Now, certain policies are made very centrally at the level of the president or the cabinet ministers. But sometimes certain other policies are made at different levels. There is no clear policy process in Sri Lanka. That is part of the problem. Anyone trying to engage and give advice to policymakers can't even understand where to enter. It is very opaque, very unpredictable, and very whimsical, if you know what I mean. කිසිම පිළිවෙලක් චාරයක් නැහැ අපේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති සම්පාදනයේ. So as a result of which, there is a great difficulty in providing very targeted, very specific kind of advice. All that scientists and other experts can do is make their advice public, write to newspapers, talk on televisions, address public forums, and hope that it will percolate to, it will somehow reach those who are making policies or making critical decisions. Unfortunately, that nexus is very, very problematic. It's not clear and it's not easy. So one of the first principles of communication is know your audience, know who you are addressing. Now, in this country where policy making is concerned, it's very difficult to know whether it is, now in the case of this rapid organic drive, was it the president? Was it the GMOA? Was it some selected environmental activists and lobbyists? Or was it somebody else who was actually driving that? It wasn't clear. Even as I watched the process closely, I could not figure it out. And in the end, when things go wrong, everybody is distancing themselves. Suddenly, there is no one taking responsibility.
Responsibility, indeed.
The other thing is in many countries, including India, and I keep citing India because it's a fellow South Asian country and a country where science and technology infrastructure is more advanced, more evolved. There is an office of science advisor to the government or science advisor to the president. Now, that is a formalized structure through which some sort of nexus between the scientific community and the government can be ensured. Now, nominally, at least, this country still has a science advisor to the president. How many of you knew that? It was first established by President J.R. Jayawardena. The first science advisor was Professor Sril Ponnam Peruma. And then there were later advisors like Dr. Aries Kovur. And over the years, that position has not been well established within the government. But even now, there is a lady scientist who's designated on an official government website as science advisor to the president, this current president. How many of you know that? She is a senior scientist teaching at the University of Sri Jayawardenapur. I can even name if you like. So we don't know these positions exist. We don't know that these structures, how effective or not they are. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, definitely. I think the policymakers and the president need to listen to their scientific advisors. Maybe that has not really happened. Anyways, you're correct. So I think we have a raised hand here. Sorry, Professor Mukund.
Yes, madam.
Yes. So we
Can I raise
have.
a question?
Yes, please, Chaitani. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay, madam. I like to raise a question to Dr. Jayanath Vidhanage, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I want to know whether in Sri Lanka, is there a proper criteria when publishing a scientific article? The article is reviewed by a scientific person, professional, before it is being published.
You mean the lay article or the
lay article or anything that conveys a scientific message to the community?
No, the thing is when we are communicating science with fellow scientists, always there's a
there are regulations in different different institutes. SLAAS has their own protocol, and I mean, National Science Foundation has their own protocol. So no issue with that. That you are asking a science journal or scientific paper to general
sir, in
public.
normal in general newspaper articles.
Newspaper articles are different. Newspaper articles are different. That's actually, I think Nalaka will answer better than me, that you are that incorporating with, I mean, associating with newspapers and journals. Yes, Nalaka.
What was the question again in terms of publishing?
So I want to know whether there is a proper criteria in publishing a scientific article in newspapers. There is a criteria like reviewing it from a scientific professional.
No.
It's not a peer review process.
Yeah.
So it needs to be in non-technical language. It ideally should be about a current issue or a topic, and it should be of interest to a majority of readers of a newspaper. When these factors are met, it is likely to be published. And newspapers are platforms. Newspapers and other media, think of them as platforms where different views and different opinions can be expressed. They can be even radically different from the established mainstream views. Those are published, and then if someone responds to it, somebody disagrees with it, that too, the newspapers or the media have an obligation to accommodate alternative points of view. So sometimes we see debates that unfold over a few days or weeks in the media where different contributors argue out. It may be something historical or contemporary, technical or societal, but different people join, and then immediately there is a certain public discussion and debate taking place.
So that's a good thing.
Sorry, it's a good thing. It's
Yeah,
a very good thing. But there is no gatekeeper, like newspapers don't have, say, a resident scientific expert who decides, okay, is this article scientific enough to publish? Now, there is a general or a common sense screening done. So if somebody say claims certain things that are totally untrue
and unacceptable,
or totally irrelevant, then those will not be published. But anything that is of public interest and topical in nature will be accommodated, and it will be open for further responses and discussion.
And also, Kumari, the main responsibilities with the author.
Just one addition. Certain newspapers where there are editors who are conscious about certain things, sometimes contact relevant expertise to verify before publishing. Particularly for certain things, people have been contacted, and it depends on the editor and his knowledge. If he suspects that there can be issues in this paper or this argument, they may contact an expert and ask, but it is not widely practiced, but certain very responsible editors do that.
And also, if we think about the journal, I mean, the science publication that published in National Science Foundation, we call Vidurava, that we publish in all 3 languages. They are actually that committee of, I mean, science popularization committee asks certain people to write articles, because, I mean, the committee that go through the titles, I mean, needy titles, and they get the best the people to write those. So that way, that maintaining the level of those articles and also the credibility. Newspapers are different.
We have some other questions on the chat. If I quickly read it out. So one is asking, what is the difference between the
Thank
summary?
you very much, sir.
Thank you, Chaitani. What is the difference between a summary and an abstract? And is it really possible to convert the information from English to a local language without being biased? Because I've seen most of the time the editors cannot use the correct language terms when they write scientific findings.
Tertiary, that what we advise, that what we told is not to translate everything, but get the story, get the essence, and you can say it in Sinhala or other language.
Correct.
So not translating all the scientific facts, but the important story should be there.
Yeah, and I think there is another question in a Sri Lankan context. What could be identified as the main limitation to convey the research findings to society? Could it be the language problem?
I think language is not a big barrier for this. Actually, most of the scientists now, that young scientists and the majority has studied. They have studied in Sinhala or Tamil medium mainly. But 20, 30 years back, we had that problem, and they studied in English, and they didn't know the Sinhala terminology and all those things. But now, situation is different. Now they are that most of them are versatile in both languages or trilingual. So it is not a big deal, but you have to think a little bit and get the correct words. And also, I must say that some that Sinhala translated words are more difficult than the English words. Right? So then that you have to think that how we can convey the message using simple words. Translate, because later translations, earlier කවුද මේ කුමාරතුංග මුනිදාසගේ වචන එච්චර අමාරු නෑ. පස්සේ කාලේ translate කරපු වචන සමහර ඒවා more difficult than the English. English terms are more familiar to the public than some Sinhala terms. ඒවත් අපි කල්පනා කරලා තමයි ලියන්නේ.
So are there any more questions from the audience? Anyone who would like to unmute and talk with the speakers directly may do so.
Another one or two have come in the chat.
Yes, there is a very long question on the chat. So if time permits, I guess I could read it out. So it says, question to Dr. Jayantha Vattavidanage. How should a science communicator tackle conventionalism in creating an impact in society, yet valuing the cultural aspects of the particular society? Can science survive and progress in isolation by ignoring traditions? For example, impact of agricultural sciences on farming community in Sri Lanka. So he goes on, so it's a bit long, the question. So, sir, would you like to address that?
I think that partly, I don't know what the person is really telling that, and also we need to think about the culture and other, culture also perhaps in very complicated in some situations. That we have to separate out the real cultural values and also the cultural practices. If you think carefully, nowadays we know most of the cultural practices have some scientific background, that background is very important to know. Most of that chem ක්‍රමවල මම අහලා තියෙනවා ගොඩක් agriculturists now say that there's a scientific basis. ඒවත් අපි බලන්න ඕනේ මොකද science found in the society. Science found in our culture. ඒක මේ western science කියලා මම දන්නේ නැහැ. කෙලින්ම මේ දෙක කොහොමද මේ සමහර වෙලාවට අපි හිතන්නේ western science විතරයි science කියලා. නමුත් very clearly we need to understand what is science, what is non-science, and what is pseudoscience. Always I can remember Professor Prashant was telling this again and again. ඒකත් දැනගන්න. නමුත් for me, without attacking our cultural practices, I think it is not a big deal to communicate science with the public. මොකද දැන් සමහර වෙලාවට කල්චර් කියලා අපි misunderstand කරපු දේවලුත් mix වෙච්ච දේවල් තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා අපි we have to separate out those things. And then අපි අනිකාටත් මේකට contribute කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් හොඳයි. It's a tricky area.
පොඩි කැලලක් කිව්වොත් ජයන්ත දැන් අර දැනුම් පද්ධති වල වෙනස්කම් තිබෙනවා. මම හිතන්නේ ඒක වෙනම සාකච්ඡාවක්. දැන් අපි දැනුම් පද්ධති ආරම්භිච්ච විදි තියෙනවා. දැන් කොන්ස්ටන්ටිනු පුල්ලර් ගැන දැන් කියන එතනින් එහාට ගිහිල්ලා අපි වෙස්ටර්න් සයන්ස් කියන එක අරාබියෙන් උඩට ගිහිල්ලා ඇති වෙච්ච කාලේ වෙනසයි. මෙතන අපේ විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ පෙරදිග සහ චීනය එහා සම්බන්ධිතව දැනුම් පද්ධති ඇති වෙච්ච ක්‍රමවේදය අතර වෙනස්කම් තියෙනවා. ඒ වෙනස්කම් වලට වටිනාකමක් දෙමින් තමයි අපි කතා කරන්න ඕනේ. වෙනස්කම් වල එක නිකන් ගහගෙන ගිහලා ප්‍රශ්න විසඳන්න බෑ. මොකද ඒ දැනුම් පද්ධතිය ඇති වෙලා තියෙන පාදක වෙච්ච ක්‍රමවේදය වෙනස්. ඒ ක්‍රමවේද දෙක තුනම අවබෝධ කර ගැනීම තුල හරි ලේසි කමියුනිකේෂන් එකක් ගෙනියන්න. එහෙම නැත්තම් වෙන්නේ අපි පටන් ගන්නවා බැරි එකක් දාගෙන මැද්දේ.
අනිත් එක knowledge system එකේ yardstick එකකින් මනින්න බෑ තවත් knowledge system එකක ඇත්ත නැත්ත. දැන් ඒක මේ යම් knowledge system එකක් ඒක තුලින්ම තමයි ඒක ඉගෙන ගන්න පුළුවන්. නැතුව මේ දෙක compare කරලා අපිට මේකෙන් මනින්න බෑ අර. අනිත් එක other thing we should know that science is a comparative truth. We are progressing.
Indeed, correct. So do we have any more questions? So I think Bhagya has requested for the recordings. Indeed, we will make it available via the SLAAS YouTube channel. And yes, there's a question from Ashani. Is the general public truly interested in reading science? Has anyone done a survey on that? Generally, they seem to be interested in reading politics and popular gossip. In that case, how should we write our articles to get their attention? Indeed, indeed.
I think if I could respond to that initially,
Yes, please.
I think it all depends on how scientific knowledge, understanding is presented. Now, if we present it as a very technical, very rigid, very pure kind of science, then the interest will be very limited. But if we take, as Jayant earlier said, the storytelling approach, the problem solving approach, that sort of, if we relate it to day-to-day needs, struggles, or even aspirations and imagination of our public, then science can find its place, not so much in labeled as science, but as a process of clarifying, process of exploring, and process of solving problems and so on. So science as a journey, science as a process, rather than science as a product or an end by itself. If we have that kind of approach, I think there is a need. Now, if you take when gas cylinder scare was there a few months ago, and exploding gas cylinders or gas cookers, there was a science to that. There was a scientific basis to understanding and solving that problem. And then scientists and experts with the right kind of technical knowledge had to get involved. And after a while, they did. They spoke out, they pointed out what was wrong, and then the necessary, the relevant institutions were forced to take action. The companies were forced to admit what they had done wrong. So there was that's a clear case of science or scientific expertise applied to address a huge concern for a few weeks, and then hopefully we've solved it for good. And so there are ongoing concerns like that, or suddenly emerging or erupting issues at times. And so the scientific community also needs to look for openings, for opportunities, for intervening, for contributing at the right time with the right advice, right knowledge, maybe as individuals, maybe collectively as SLAAS or other bodies, other professional bodies, but that opportunity is there. It changes from time to time. How to intervene is left to each individual and each professional body.
Just one addition to what Nalaka says, go about 6 to 8 months back, maybe 1 year back. People were reading about even gene sequencing on COVID. People were interested in different variants coming. People were interested in what drug could solve this issue. People were asking questions and were seeking information on vaccination. Because as I was heavily involved in that, the questions coming from the public in a media program about 1 hour, you can't answer those questions within the 1 hour. Such interest was there on very scientific things that we were only discussing before within very close scientific community. So which means if the need is there, if the environment is there, if people think that it is going to affect us, then people is going to read it. But it is our duty to make it palatable to them, to understand with very clear, simple language, clarity, and not giving them additional questions, additional burdens, additional fear by trying to explain. If we can solve their simple questions, there is a huge, I think, vacuum that you can fill.
Yeah. Professor Mikundan, would you like to add something to that, or?
No, interesting thing is when you disseminate information through scientific articles, of course, you get citations. How many people they are going on the citations, of course, you could see that that particular subject is dealt, or whatever the findings we have dealt with that particular article. But when you go with the public, that feedback, when they give feedback and they comment on certain issues that they wanted to listen continuously. And of course, you can even get views from the media, the newspaper media, where they receive a lot of feedback from the public. The success of those programs, and people are continuously reading. And of course, that is one of the way we can able to assess on that. Or even as an authors, we receive a lot of feedbacks from the people concerned, and they even comment on certain topics they want to listen from this particular area. So that also one of the plus point that I could say, as they asked that we didn't do a survey, because the problem is going for online survey, because we don't know who will have an access. Because the people who are reading on these articles may not have the access of going for online survey. Otherwise, we have to go with the physical mode of giving question and answers, questionnaire, and to get that feedback. of course, that could have been done. As I said, we would have gone for that. But online way that when they give feedback, based on that, of course, and you see here in Jaffna, the articles written on that particular day, Saturday, you don't find any excess papers left in the shops.
Oh, really?
So it depends on the people are taking that and reading if the information, what it carries, is important for them. And right now we are facing for food security and food problem and this and that. And if they wanted to get information from this easy way to get from a newspaper, and they post questions and we try to answer, as they did, there are different modes of way of communicating. When they ask questions and we answer for that, of course, that is the real context. We see that people are getting knowledge. And when we meet the people in the villages, of course, they are reading this, reading the newspapers. And of course, those are the papers reaching there. But now they have a lot of access from internet and mass media. However, this platform also people have used that. I think that we need to have a formal survey. I think that we may be a little difficult right now with that point, but we can do and see what actually really this media.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think we may have time for one last question. We have someone, it's Chaitani again. Yes, Chaitani, please go ahead.
Chaitani.
I think hand was not taken off.
Removed,
She
yeah.
did not switch. That it was
So
throughout.
it was down and then it's come up again. Anyways, okay, one last question to all speakers. Any special suggestion for communicating science for students at the school level?
Yeah, I think every school, they have a science club and science union. And now you could see that the students, they started communicating through media. They listen all these informations. Of course, they have now in their hands, the world is in their hands. They receive day to day the updated information, and they started writing about ICT, the advancement, what is happening in science. So students now, they started communicating to the media, especially the public, and they try to learn the language, the way how they can able to communicate. There are a lot of contests going on with the media people as well as different organizations. And this actually helps them to even more, because they are studying the science, and as well as they try to learn the language, and they are very good, even better than us, communicating in mother tongue, because they are using the language and they learn and they modify. Of course, the teachers in the schools, they are helping them to moderate, and those student unions are doing well.
Yes, we have more than 1,000 science societies registered with National Science Foundation, and we have provided a platform for all of those to communicate science and also conduct various activities, and also wallpapers, maintain wallpapers and those things. But what Professor Mikundan said is correct. So they are versatile with all new media and they get information. But here I think SLAAS also can have some body or whatever after submitting all lay papers, that if SLAAS can decide what are the papers or whatever, the findings disseminate with schools and the public, I think it's also a good thing. Not just sending all to the schools and the public. I think SLAAS should be able to some way of selecting at various fields or whatever relevant to the public. That's also an important thing.
My idea very quickly about communicating science for students at school level is make it fun, make it an exploration, make it something that is extracurricular to the extent that it's not trapped within the classroom or the exam-oriented curriculum. There is so much more that students can explore and discover and innovate with. This is the digital generation. As we just heard, they are connected. Many of them go online, not just consume content, but also create content. And right now, they may not be creating too much science-related content, but that is certainly something worth exploring. With TikTok or Facebook or YouTube, or even with Zoom. Now, I know many student science societies that are now using Zoom, this very platform, to meet and engage with a researcher or a scientist or a subject expert. And then they have conversations with them, discussion and debate with them. So the sky is the limit. There is a lot that can be done with new technologies, as well as the old-fashioned getting together face-to-face and having a conversation, a discussion, but making it fun and sharing the passion for science, I think, is very important. If you are a scientist who wants to enthuse the next generation, please share not just the knowledge, but also the fun and the passion of doing science.
Yes.
Indeed.
Indeed.
Correct. I think all of us are here because we are passionate about science, and I think we need to direct it towards, getting out there and communicating to the public as well. So I hope SLAAS has made a good start. So I think we might need to wrap this session up because we are almost, we've taken almost 2.5 hours. So let me thank all the speakers on behalf of the Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Science. Thank you very much indeed for coming together on such short notice and for being so enthusiastic about the whole thing. So I must thank all the speakers individually. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you for the participants. We hope we have gained some helpful hints from this workshop, and we hope that you would put it to good use. And please go ahead and submit that abstract along with your SLAAS main abstract. So please submit an abstract to us written in layman's language. And hopefully you can add a small translation at the end of it if you yourself wish to do the translation. And as editors of SLAAS, Dr. Sashi Prabhavita Narachi and myself, we would try to, direct it towards the relevant media to help you gain visibility for your research findings. And so we really encourage you to go and put it all out there. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you also for agreeing to host this content on the YouTube, because by morning today, we had some 440 registered participants. So I don't know last minute what happened, maybe some, small issue, maybe the reminders, I don't know, but that really showed the interest because there were students from all over Sri Lanka. And many students actually. So hence, we've got approval from each one of the speakers, and SLAAS appreciates it very much that you agreed to host this content on our YouTube page. And I'm sure it will get a lot of visibility as well. So thank you very much indeed, and hope everyone has a peaceful night and a blissful night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Deshani. Thanks.